for his new church. Mass is still being said in Latin. It's still being sung in Latin. To be a composer in these times required that you be very nimble. Here's just a brief wrap-up. The English were Roman Catholics until 1529. Then they were, let's call them Henrican Catholics from 1534 to 1547. Then they became moderate to extreme Protestants under Edward VI. Roman Catholics once more under Mary, 1553 to 58, and once again, moderate Protestants under Elizabeth I. The two greatest composers of this period, Thomas Tallis and William Byrd, were born Catholic. Guess what? So was Henry VIII. But they continued to write in Latin for the Catholic liturgy for the rest of their lives. They also began to write in English. Let's hear an example of Thomas Tallis, one of the greatest pieces of Tallis repertoire, a 40-voice motet called Spem in Alium.
There's no way to console you on that. Yeah, Isaac. Yeah. Say Isaac's. Let's go one sense. He found that icon, it's a few years ago. It was so marked out. Even now it's good.
Okay, that was worth it right there. Okay, what you got to do?
How you doing, sir?
Sometimes I feel like this man here to go. Like they won't go. I'm trying to answer stuff. You're kidding? Actually,
I'm on board.
that makes sense.
Oh, okay.
That's an extra profile. Have you baked out?
So we keep what you Yeah, I met God, but I didn't know he's from here.
This boy, Queen.
I was joking. I'm from the Bronx. Oh, I talked to someone. I did. I met her. Yeah, Michelle introduced me to her last day.
Right. I did for a hard time.
When did you, how long did you live? I sure, I mean, I until I went to college.
Okay.
My parents still live. All my
You're kidding me. I've actually thought of it. I just.
Were you motioning me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna get this in. I don't know if it's supposed to.
Sir, Happy New Year.
My clothes all along. That's a good point.
Hi.
It's a cost.
I've been off for a week. I better know where I am. My first day.
Yeah, you're right. And they're all linked together. They're easy.
Somebody had a cookout.
That's
That was my first guess, but I don't know.
What's that, chair?
Oh, the painting's been on for a while.
Was there something back there?
Yeah, at one time, but,
Yeah, the artist moved to California. He asked for the paintings when they were here. She came in one day.
I have to look.
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, January 7th Human Services meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. and declare that we have a quorum. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the December 3rd, 2012 meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second. Question? Alderman Holmes?
I would like to make a correction.
Okay.
If you notice in staff present on the December 3rd meeting, Matt, the name is there twice, and it says Ford, it should say Henry Ford.
Okay.
Okay?
Do we have that?
So delete one of the Matts and add Henry in front of Ford.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to take a vote on that?
Mm-hmm.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. It's not on the agenda, but we'll insert citizen comments. Is everyone who wants to speak tonight, have you taken an opportunity to sign up? Is there anyone else? Okay. Residents will have 3 minutes to share their comments. The first person on our list is Ms. Carolyn Murray.
My name is Carolyn Murray. I'm here to address safety as far as the streets in Evanston, the investigation as it stands currently from my son, Justin Murray, who was murdered November 29th, internal communications, public communications as it affects public notices of criminal and gun-related activity in my community. Openly, I want to say that it hurts me to publicly speak out tonight as it pertains to what I consider a basic human right is to be safe in the town and the community that you live in. I just want to give you a little background to my dealings with this issue. Several years ago, there was a gun involved in a street fight across the street from my home. I went over, there were some neighbors that were in an altercation. The father of one of the boys pulled a gun on the fighting boy against his son. I tried to break up the fight. The father pulled the gun and he approached me and told me if I was to interfere with the fight, he was going to shoot me. At that point, it was after school hours, I'd say about 3:30, close to 4 o'clock. Myself and several neighbors called the police. We did not see a squad car to respond to the phone call for at least 10 to 15 minutes. I called the police several times, hysterically screaming that the man had a gun. So that was the first incident. That was several years ago. I'll bring you to current 2012 when I was out having dinner one night in a downtown restaurant here in Evanston, and my daughter called me and sent me several text messages. She says, "Mom, I'm terrified, I'm scared. The boys from down the street are shooting in front of the house." I said, "Well, baby, did you call the police?" She said, "Well, yeah," and hung up from her immediately, and I called the police. They said that they had received several phone calls that night of the shooting. I received then several phone calls from my other neighbors that were concerned about the shots that happened in the middle of the street. I then inquired about having some police presence in the noted house, that we made several phone calls and several attempts to try to get some additional protection in front of the house or on the block. From one shift commander to a second shift commander to now we're going into the 9 or 10, 11 o'clock hour, we finally got a car presence on the block after reporting the several shots that were fired prior to that evening. So also, let me bring you full circle. Back in July, August, I had a conversation with the alderman. We were discussing increased gun violence in the community, and in my ward. I wouldn't even necessarily say the community. So I said, well, you know, Alderman, I'm getting kind of tired of the guy or he or she, I'm sorry, let me be politically correct, that's been doing target practice outside my window. I've called several times every night between the hours of 1 and 4 o'clock. They decided they want to shoot outside my window. As you know, that led to the gun buyback in December 15th. So my question, what is the operational procedures for patrolling our streets? When you're made aware that the threat levels are increasing. I'm getting a lot of questions from the neighbors. Carolyn, are you safe? Carolyn, is everything okay? I really don't know how to respond because geographically, they told me where all the shootings happen. They told me every different location. But what I made note to them was the fact that we know where it happened, but aren't you concentrating on the times that it happened? I don't necessarily need to see 75% of the police force working during the daytime. Most of the crimes that are happening in my community, they're happening at night. The response times, the patrol times, what is going on here? So let me make note of another thing that is called to my attention. The day that my son was killed, there was ongoing threats that were made in the courthouse that day in Skokie, to the point where the sheriffs indicated that they were going to need additional security because they did not feel comfortable with the level of staff they had at the courthouse that day. There were particular individuals that were present in the courthouse that day, and by the time one of my family members got back to Evanston after dropping one person off, before he could get to Brown Avenue, my son was dead. I don't know what the current status is with this investigation. I've given several attempts to communicate everything that I know. All of my witnesses cooperated. Personally, I'm getting a little protrude at the fact that every time I look in an article, I see gang-related, family-related. I don't know these people. I don't know these people. I'm not related to them. I pay my taxes. I'm the co-chair of a Fifth Ward meeting every third Thursday of the month. Where is this coming from? I'm not in a gang. My son just came from California. He wasn't in town, not even 4 hours. I communicate with the police. The last time I left a message, I was going to receive a phone call back. I'm still waiting for that phone call. The incident that happened where another one of my neighbors' house was shot up, I called an officer and I said, is this true? Because I'm getting phone calls from my family. They want me to leave out the house again. They don't feel that I'm safe. The officer started his shift at 3 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, I called him back and I said, well, what's going on? He tells me at 6 o'clock that he didn't know anything about the shooting. Now, his shift started at 3. The internal communication. I would think that if you have this type of investigation going on, why wasn't I made aware of a shooting that's less than 5 blocks away from my house? When one of the suspects or a person of interest mother was picked up with a pistol and 31 rounds of ammo in her purse, that was 6 blocks away from my house. Why wasn't I made aware of that? So again, you can call my phone. And I specifically remember when there was a shooting at McDonald's, there was a phone tree that alerted all the residents about the shooting at McDonald's. Well, why didn't I get alerted about the shooting that was 5 blocks away from my house? What is the operational procedure for safety and patrol if these young street thugs, unorganized, uneducated, and unemployed, if they can do this in your neighborhood, what will the police and patrol and operation look like when the terrorists come that are organized, well-funded? If you can't protect 1900 block of Gray, you gonna protect Northwestern University, North Shore Hospital, Evanston Township High School? I just want some answers.
Thank you. Betty Esther. And if possible, I'm going to try to keep you to 3 minutes, if that's all right, dear.
That'll be fine.
Thank you.
Except usually you have your citizen make the comments after each issue, and I would like to hear the discussion from Chief Edison on his report on the police review comments, and also the township and the Evanston Wilmette Golf. And then I would like to speak after I hear those, if that's possible, because it kind of threw me. We have citizen comments at the end. So could you go back to the end for me to hear that? Or did y'all change it at the last meeting? And
That's fine.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have Ms. Madeline Dupree.
Good evening, everyone. I would just like to say a few things.
Sorry, do you mind just saying your name and address?
Madeline Dupree, resident of Evanston. As a society, or maybe I should say some of us in our own communities, like Evanston, choose to make decisions that will create more shame and contempt on those who have struggled long and hard to stay afloat. And in the end, they fall by the wayside in a system that was created to keep some people locked up and locked out of the system even more. Again, I will say, I do not condone certain behaviors in our community, but I hope and I pray that we embrace humaneness in our community this year and forever after this. Embracing humaneness, I must say, means, in my opinion, we must let each other know that we can give and show love and compassion and forgiveness towards each other. We must talk openly about race, the injustice that's going on in our town and in our country. Our children are not crazy. They are not stupid. We have a race dialogue that's going to end at the end of this month. We must keep it going. If any of us think that these things here are just happening in our community, you are sadly mistaken. My heart goes out to all of the parents whose children have been killed, whose children have killed in our community. It must stop. We must pull together. Otherwise, it will not stop. We must stop isolating each other. We must forgive. If God can forgive us, if Jesus can forgive us, then what the heck are we about? I want us to think. Think twice about our conditions in Evanston. And that goes for all of us. This humane service here, all of us here in this community, in this room. Seriously, we must think about it. And my heart goes out to those people who are in jail, who have done these things in our community, and who have died because of it. And I say this with not a lack of compassion. I have a son. I had a son who died. He died from cancer, but nevertheless he died. And he didn't have to go that way, probably, if he would have had insurance or something, you know. But we must show humaneness. Thank you.
Next on the list, we have Ms. Priscilla Giles. If you can please state your name and address.
Priscilla Giles, 1829 Ashland. In church last Sunday, I was told of a man who was blind with a flashlight going back and forth across a dark corner. And the person who knew him saw him and said to him, "Why are you going back and forth with a flashlight? You're blind, you can't see anyway." And he said, "I'm here to make a way for those who cannot see, who in the dark." And I'm saying this because it seems like we are neglecting the people in the dark, the people who need help in the different ways that Evanston is not providing. And the parents, the unemployed, Evanston is not helping those people, but yet and still we are still broke, getting more money for other things. And I'm still waiting. I'm not the only one waiting. I can walk, and I don't need help walking. But we're still waiting for the Foster or Fleetwood, Jourdain, some kind of way that people can come in wheelchairs and walkers, canes, and come in unencumbered by curbs and a long walk to the general meeting. That way, we can look out for our own selves when we are at that point where we can no longer do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Justin Blake.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everybody. Justin Blake don't currently have an address in Evanston. Our old address is 1917 or Prim Towers or Ebenezer Church or the Jacob Blake Manor, whichever one you want to use for tonight. The reason we're here is because we have vested interest in this community. And we believe that we need to awaken our community. We've been asleep at the wheel. I don't know how such a thing occurs through years where you have great things happening, then things sort of come down and you come back up. But a quick conversation the other day, somebody was talking to us. You know, we manage properties as well. I'm a general contractor and we manage properties. And the lady said, "I don't understand why God created roaches." And, you know, because I'm spraying apartments, what have you. And we went on to tell her, I think, you know, I really couldn't think of a good reason. We talked about other animals and, you know, how they fed into the food chain, mice and et cetera. And, you know, I said that, you know, I think about roaches letting you know that there's a severe problem in the home. And it might, you know, in regards to cleanliness and things of this nature. So I said, roaches are just the red flag to let you know to get back up on your job, to clean your house thoroughly, to remove these things that should not be in your home because they carry diseases. And that's what's going on here presently. We have to clean our house. We as a community, just not Evanston, Chicago metropolitan area, and our country needs to really alert themselves to the fact that we see roaches. And when you put light on them, they go and squiggle off and hide. When you clean thoroughly and change your lifestyle and what's going on, then they leave and never come back. So our hearts go out to all the families up here in Evanston that have had death in their life. My sister Carolyn, who's a classmate of ours, and all the families recently. We need to bring peace about ourselves. We need to find a way to interact with these young people, which we are doing through our organization, through another organization gentleman that's here tonight, Tracy, will be talking about their people, I'm sure. The Peace Pioneers of Evanston and other such organizations that are out there, we're asking to please contact us and work with us. We are not out here trying to recreate the wheel. We are merely trying to be an umbrella to stop the violence that's trying to hit upon our community. And when we work together, we can seam ourselves together, and some of the stuff will make its way to the side. We're not an overnight answer. We have some short-term and some long-term policies that we're getting ready to implement starting the month of Black History Month. We have a youth organization that's getting ready to do some big stuff. We're working with our seniors. We are committed to rebuilding our community because it's just not violence. When you look at the big grand sum of things, we have a dropout rate of high school, which is totally unacceptable. We have a reoccurrence of people going back to jail, which is unacceptable. We need to shake up our whole community. We've had great conversations with some of the ministers up this way, some of the imams. We need to get rid of the roaches. And all that it takes to do that is to be vigilant. So we've had several meetings since a couple of the prior deaths that have transpired, and we've had 40 to 75 people consistently come out and share their ideas with us. Now we're putting them into action in the new year. So I merely came to say thank you for what you're doing and the service that you're providing and that you're giving time away from your families to be here to make sure something that gets done, that the city is involved. And we hope to see you guys after February or during February coming to one of our events so you can see that we're on the case and that we can interact and work with you guys in the near future. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you. Mr. John Bamberg.
Good evening. I'm not a Evanston resident at the moment, but as you know, I grew up here and went to school here in Evanston. There's a couple things that I would like to talk to you about today. Number one, I'm sick of every time I turn around, I'm hearing of things that the Evanston police are going around and saying about me. I have someone checking right now on a young lady. I was out of town after Christmas and came back that told me January 1st that this woman stated that 2 cops, white cops, came to her door, told her that my son had been killed to keep her children in because there's supposed to be this big explosion with violence. A young lady, I guess, that Nortaf talked to in connection with my son's murder investigation, she stated that an officer, she mentioned a Tom and someone else, I can't remember what the name was, asked, was I the one that had this foolishness going? You know, when I look at stuff like that, it reminds me of the government, as you that have a half a mind here today know as how they try to set the stage for something to go on. I have not threatened anyone. I have no involvement in any conspiracy, any knowledge, and has never ran around with young boys promoting violence of any type. If you knew me, you know that I spoke at many schools across the city of Chicago. I've spoken juvenile detention center. I am mentioned in Victor Woods' book. Okay, I've been with him speaking for many years. These are things that I don't talk about, and these are things that I don't hear anyone else talking about because they always want to grab something that they can run with, and most of the time, that's something that they really don't know nothing about. Again, I'm sick of this. Another thing that I wanted to bring up today is my son had some keys that was in his possession. I was given a copy of the keys. The one don't work. I guess you need an alarm. This is a card that someone else is getting ready to take and move away with, and I would like the keys. The keys have nothing to do with anything. They were simply in his pocket, and I called Commander Hutton today to tell him that they didn't work, and I would like the keys instead of the copy, but I didn't get an answer from him. There are many things I would like to discuss, but I really don't have that much time. So I wanted to just simply touch on that, tell you about the police's involvement that I've heard for years with my name in their mouth as though they actually know me. They do not know me, okay? And the truth about me, I never hear. Only some foolishness that's made up by these people, okay? Another thing that I would like to say, me and my family is highly offended with all of this that you have going on about the Hatfields and the McCoys. Understand, my family is civilized. There is no ongoing battle that's been going on against basically two ignorant hillbillies that knew that's went on so long that they don't remember where it started. Antoine Hill killed my son. We all know that, okay? Your people that speak to the media telling them about this. Now, I'm going to tell you where this started. The opening and closing arguments in my son's murder is where this started. Okay? All it was a bunch of garbage. Everybody knows that. But the one thing that the media never did speak of about the trial, they spoke on the Hatfields and the McCoys and that the judge didn't have enough evidence. They didn't say that this girl, this eyewitness, basically robbed him. His pockets was turned inside out. The media didn't talk about that. They didn't talk about the fact that 4 witnesses that was there, he did not match the description. They did not talk about the first officer supposedly that was there and detective was there, stated in the trial under oath that they did not ask the description of Byrd. Basically, Jody Wright refused to answer when he found out that Byrd was John Bamberg. When my attorney made it clear that out of 20 officers he came in contact with, no one asked the description of Byrd, he basically refused to answer that question. There was a lot that took place in this trial that no one talked about, okay? So I want you to know that we are aware of this foolishness that's going on with the media that knows better, okay? They want to simply make us look like a bunch of ignorant niggas, basically, okay? This is what this is all about. And another thing, the suspect, then they went from the Hatfields and the McCoys to gang members. Let me explain something to you about this. First of all, you have no one charged with anything. How do you have the audacity to stand up in front of the media and talk about our families like this when you have no one charged? Therefore, you have nothing. You have nothing to talk about as far as who we are and what took place. Now, let me make this clear to you. My son, I ask all of you this. Research what took place at that courthouse, okay? Those transcripts. And you will see my son had no business being charged with anything, okay? That is the bottom line. Now, here we go to the next thing that took place, Justin being killed. Okay, Justin was killed. They have nobody in custody for that, okay? They probably suspect a couple people. That's all it is. They're suspects. Okay, then there's Javar that's dead. Okay, now they know who walked Javar in the alley to be killed. They know all of that. They also know that he is not related to the Davises or anything. Their suspect in Carolyn's murder, one of the guys that they suspect that was involved, he is not related to the Davises at all. So why is they talking about this foolishness to the media over and over? And especially after I've requested that they do not do that, because they have no grounds for this other than I can see, which is to make it look like these is a bunch of ignorant niggas, don't worry about them. Okay? Because there's no other reason that you have that could justify saying this type of stuff to the media about our families. Okay, one of the relatives to the Davis family came to Javard's funeral. Another one I seen out south a couple months ago walked up and shook my hand. Another one, every time I see him, he speak. Our families are not at war with one another. My family don't sit around and focus on the Davises or no foolishness pertaining to the Davises. And from what I told, it's not like that with them with us. They might have a couple family members that don't like somebody. That's natural. And some of y'all that don't like each other. That don't mean we trying to kill each other. So please address this, because I talked to another family member, one of the Davis relatives today. We are going to sit down again later on to address this entire situation. We don't appreciate this. You know, I mean, it's things like you put out stuff like that, and how do you think that makes all of us feel? My family are working people, civilized people, and this is what you say about us? As far as the Bambergs go, I'm John Bamberg. Then there's Lil John. Then there's Javard that's deceased. Then there's Justin, who's in his 3rd year at Morehouse. And then there's David, my nephew. Those are the only Bamberg men that exist in this territory. But every time I look around, you're saying something about a Bamberg. I have lots of relatives. But this is what you discuss and put out this bad press and all this hype about the Bambergs, what they're going to do. You don't know us. Javard didn't talk to nobody. Most people that I know, I don't even talk to. How do you know me to know what I'm going to do? So I would appreciate it if you would address this. Okay, this is all that I'm going to say for today. I don't have a bunch of time. As you know, you will be hearing about all of this again. There are other people in the media that like to talk to me. So, yes, I am going to be talking to them, telling my side. But I would appreciate it if you would have some decency and address these police. I mean, it's a lot of things that bring on great damage in the community. For instance, when the chief of police made that statement that they had physical evidence against Lil John, they had no physical evidence, okay? It was checked in an inconclusive box. That means maybe. All the contents that was needed for it to be gunpowder residue was not there. But this is what your chief said. All you got to do is Google it. They didn't mention the fact that Jeremy Neiman lied under oath about Lil John and stated that Lil John told him that he was 5'11". They said, you know that this was being recorded because it's a murder investigation. He said, yes. He said, play the tape. Oh, no, it must have happened someplace else. You see people telling blatant lies. Investigate these police officers, okay? Because I'm going to tell you, it's getting ready to be a lot of information out here. It's going to be out here for everyone to see in just a second. John just signed his papers. You're going to see his lawsuit is getting ready to be filed. There's things that are getting ready to be happening. I suggest that you investigate the police, because what I'm telling you, this is nothing that I made up. It's all on transcript at the courthouse. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we move on to the next item, Chief Eddington, would you like to reply to any of the comments, sir?
Once again, I am concerned and sorry for the families who have lost members. I am. Unfortunately, with the comments that were made tonight, there's a world of difference between being found not guilty and innocent. I think that will be reflected in the upcoming civil suits and ramifications. That's just the way it is. As to comments as to the physical evidence, that was the focus of a motion to suppress, and a judge made a decision on the information that they had before them. So those are the ebb and flow of criminal trials. And once again, as Mr. Bamberg said, there's a transcript, and we'll see how that all plays out. As to the concern about the situation between several groups of individuals, some of them related, some of them not, frankly, I wished I was wrong. But the continued shootings and homicides lead me to believe that I'm not. The city of Evanston has a very open process that tonight is part of it, that how we investigate complaints, how the police conduct is reviewed, and the citizen panels that review them is on display for everybody to see. And so, once again, I invite that scrutiny and look at the situations as we deal with them, and also the complexity of clearing homicide cases with issues that involve a no-snitch culture and the unwillingness to testify against offenders. And that makes these cases extremely hard to put together, and that was the essence of the case, the recent homicide trial. The eyewitness made several conflicting statements. Part of that was based on her testimony that she was intimidated. The judge took that in consideration, made her finding based on that, and found her not to be credible, but that's also in the transcript. And so, once again, I am sincerely sorry for the family losses involved in this. But at the same time, as Mr. Bamberg said, there are individuals in both these families who are disinclined to let this go and put this down. There have been shootings since the last homicide. That's a fact. And so we will continue to investigate those, and you as the Human Service Committee will have oversight of the police department, our conduct, and the results of our investigation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Grover has a question.
Thank you, Alderman Braithwaite. Chief, could you address Mrs. Murray's request for information about some of our operational procedural stuff so that
if we reflect back over the time since Justin was killed, and I want you to freeze frame that time and compare it to prior years that I have been here as the chief of police, when the net unit and after the inception of the TAC unit, those units were rolled into residential burglary suppression during the pre-holiday season. That didn't occur this year. They were assigned to Police Beat 77 to be a visible presence in that area to suppress further acts of violence. And so that is part of our mission. Also, I am concerned about the phone call situation, but I have to say, in my defense, in the department's defense, I was on a three-way phone call December 21st with Mr. Bamberg and Carolyn Murray regarding these incidents. I'm accessible, I'm findable, we will deploy resources accordingly. And once again, this is a difficult, complex situation that we have focused an incredible amount of resources on, not only ours, but those of the NORTAF investigators. Once we receive the results of multiple phone subpoenas, I will ask the NORTAP Governing Board, which is the chiefs of the 13 towns that contribute manpower, to reactivate for 2 or 3 days to just review those phone records. So this is a multi-pronged process where we will deploy a manpower as is available to these areas. And I think, frankly, that manpower has reduced follow-on events to some degree.
Are there any other questions? I do have a quick follow-up question just to one of the concerns that was raised, Chief Eddington. Whose responsibility is in the police department to communicate to the family, and what's the level of frequency in a situation like this?
It's usually the lead detective. And I believe the lead detective on this is Sergeant Glue. He's assisted by Detective Levy. As a matter of fact, I think they had probably an hour-long chat with Mr. Bamberg last Thursday or Friday.
And is he the lead officer on both cases?
I believe he is.
Is that
Thank you,
it?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The next agenda item for discussion is review of police complaints. Any questions? Alderman Holmes.
In reviewing and reading over the complaints, I found it very interesting to look at CR 11-20. I think that's right. And for those of you who attended the very first race dialogue that we had, you might remember, I don't know if you caught it or not, but the gentleman stood up and described this whole situation to us. Do you remember? Yeah. I just found it very interesting that it was so vivid that as soon as I started to read it, I thought, oh, I've heard this before. It's the exact same incident that he explained to us that night in terms of the racial aspect. And I think I'm going to say again, I said this at the December meeting, I'm really counting a lot on the upcoming training that the chief has arranged for our police department, because it's very, very important that we have officers who are given respect, but also give respect in return. And a lot of these are just plain old respect issues. The same with the 11-18, I think it was. I'm sorry, I had it on my computer and I can't pull it up, so I can't read my notes. But I'm just banking a lot on the training. I think that that is one of the issues that we have. We have a lot of new officers. When I say new officers, they haven't been in the community a long time. And that is something that I think we have to understand the complexity of Evanston and its community, and to really know, our community, and to know. I've said many, many times. In fact, the council did vote that we were going to try to come up with some new incentives to try to get police officers to live in the community. I still think that having police officers live in the community is a key piece to knowing and understanding the community better. So I will be still. I'm going to run again, so I'm still going to be on that issue because I think it's a very important one.
Thank you. Any other comments? Alderman Fisk.
Thank you. I thought it might be helpful, Chief, if you would just walk us and the viewers at home through the process of filing a complaint. Once a complaint comes into the police department, what happens to it?
Thank you, Alderman. Our current policy of the Evanston Police Department is to accept all complaints. We have forms at the desk that are available. As a matter of fact, Alderman Braithwaite brought to my attention a situation where we may have been reluctant to pass out one of those forms, and that will be part of that situation that we're going to investigate. Most of those complaints are investigated by the Office of Professional Standards. With me this evening is Commander Diane Davis, who runs that unit. She and Sergeant Dugan are assigned to that unit that reviews and investigates these incoming complaints. Once they've investigated it, they will, and that includes an interview of the witnesses if they're available. And I think that as you sit on the Human Services Committee for an extended period of time, you will find one of the more difficult situations we deal with is the reluctance of the witnesses to come forward and verify statements. And I think that has an impact in several ways. First of all, the timeline in these events is greatly stretched out when we don't get that cooperation. On the other hand, when we do get cooperation, it moves along relatively quickly. After it's gone through the OPS process, reviewed, the witnesses interviewed, identifications of shortcomings or not, it's put through the chain of command, and disciplinary recommendations are attached at each step: sergeant, commander, deputy, and finally to my office for a final recommendation. After I make that recommendation, it's forwarded to two separate citizen police review committees, and you will find their findings on the bottom of each of these complaints. CPAC and EPAC agree or don't, and that result is listed. Then that package is forwarded to the Human Services Committee, where we talk about the 4 CRs and 2 DIs that we chatted about this evening, or reviewed by yourselves this evening. One of the things that I think we lost track of last time, if I may, is a complaint that was investigated the first time, got the EPAC, one of the EPAC members felt that the investigation was insufficient based on some personal knowledge that he had. He asked that it be reinvestigated. Based on that reinvestigation, several significant policy changes were undertaken inside the department. Specifically, rather than waiting for a complaint to come in, there's several indicators that if you've been an experienced officer, you have an idea that something has gone awry, there's going to be a problem. Like, I went through name and badge number, who's your supervisor. Basically, when the officer perceives the encounter going in that direction, he or she is now mandated to write a report that day on the event. And once again, the issue that the EPAC member brought to our attention was based in part on the citizen waited 3 or 4 months to come in and complain. Memories were fuzzy. It was not a good result. Consequently, this system resulted in that change. And so I think as we look at the entire system, there are benefits to each step along the way, and frankly, the city and the police department reap those benefits as we go through this process.
Is there a follow-up? I think I just want to share with the committee one of the issues that I'm discussing with the chief is really taking a very close look at the statistics coming out of the OPS, paying attention to the total number of complaints. I've asked him to produce a report to look at the complaints broken down by race, as well to look at the officers who have more than 3 complaints in 1 year. And so I think Alderman Holmes and I, and I'm sure everyone on the committee, we share the same perception that you see a higher number of black residents coming in and complaining, and we just want to really take a closer look at that and the trend. And I think looking at those statistics and understanding the training that's involved, the goal is to reduce the number of complaints and to change the perception right now that most citizens, particularly black citizens, have of the Evanston Police Department. So I am looking forward at the appropriate time to bring that back to the committee, along with taking a deeper look at the training. If there are no other comments, we have item 4, items for consideration, the Township of Evanston December 2012 monthly bills. It's been moved and seconded. Assessor Wilson, do you have a report?
Thank you. I'm Bonnie Wilson, Evanston Township Assessor. I just want to make my monthly report. The Evanston 2012 appeal period to the Cook County Board of Review is certified and now published. Of the 231 taxpayers who utilize the services provided by the Evanston Township Assessor's Office, 76% received decreased assessments. Over half, 53% of the taxpayers who were no change for 2012 by the Board of Review, received previous triannual assessments relief from appeals through my office to the Board of Review or the county assessor. I also want to mention that the 2012 Senior Citizen Assessment Freeze and Senior Citizen Exemption Renewal mailing went out on Friday. I guess I can go this way. Is that how I can do this? On Friday, and I just received mine today and have due dates of February the 6th. Anyone born in 1947 or before and lived in their property on January 1st, 2012 are eligible for the 2012 senior exemption. The first-time qualifiers must provide a recent tax bill and a state ID or a driver's license with the correct address to my office for forwarding to the county assessor. According to the county assessor, generic exemption forms should be available. They're now available at my office. I encourage the seniors to come to my office to give us their forms, because this way we can get better track of making sure they got the exemptions that they were entitled to. And our address is 846 Dodge, and I would encourage them to call for an appointment, and that's 847-332-2465. Two reminders that every senior needs to apply for a senior exemption every year. That's not, it used to be that they didn't only applied once and then they got the senior exemption. That's not true anymore. They have to apply every year. The problem with this form, and I'll go give it to the show it to the camera. There are two forms on this form that they get. One is for the senior exemption, which anyone over 65 is entitled to. The other one is for the senior freeze, and that's if your income is less than $55,000. So someone might see this senior freeze and think, well, I don't qualify, so I'm not going to fill this out. But even if you don't qualify for a senior freeze, you must fill this out if you're over 65 and born in the year 1947 or prior to that year. So, and I encourage people to come to the office to give us their forms so we can make sure and we can follow them on our programs to make sure they got the exemptions. I also want to mention in December 2012, 8 taxpayers received corrections for missed property tax exemptions totaling over $15,000. The 2012 fiscal year total for the first 9 months of the year is now over $353,582. And please contact my office if you feel you missed a previous property tax exemption. The state law still allows corrections back to 2008 for missed exemptions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Alderman Braithwaite.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to include this information in my newsletter. If I could, Assessor Wilson, if you would send me just a blurb, I could.
When is your newsletter?
I'm hoping to draft something this week, to get out this week.
Okay. Can I could probably fax this to you, or.
I think she's just looking probably for the highlights.
Okay.
Just
Well,
the dates.
you have does she have a copy of this?
There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
That's what I needed.
Okay. All right. But be sure to tell them that that's what I said.
Every senior needs to apply for senior exemption every year.
Right.
Every year.
And if they don't qualify for the senior freeze, they still need to apply for the senior exemption.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
What's that? Oh, it's moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The last item, we have communications from the Evanston-Wilmette Golf Association. Mr. Gaynor, who's going to make the report?
As a representative to the board from the city, a non-voting member, I've been working with the golf course board, and Perry Weinberg here, who is the president of the board currently, can certainly provide a brief summary and or answer any questions.
Thank you. Sir.
I'm Perry Weinberg. I live on Asbury and am a volunteer acting president of the golf board. I think you all have a copy of the report that was submitted, and it basically sets out our priorities for 2013. 2012 was a challenging year, and there were few people that were around, and there was debt, and there was a lawsuit. So we barely made it through the year. The parking did help substantially, but it's not the way to run a golf course. The 2013 year is starting with a room filled and actually an overflow of volunteers for the board. We expect to have about 22 members seated from the Evanston and Wilmette communities at the meeting the end of this month on January 24th. We're also looking towards, we've been promised by plaintiff a settlement of the lawsuit. We'll find out if that comes to fruition on January 16th. That's when the next court hearing is. We expect that settlement to resolve a number of, certainly the big conflict that has held up fundraising and most everything else we're doing. It also, aside from having been constraining for us in the past year, it did force us to reassess our policies and how we're going to do things going forward. And as such, we're going to be a more financially responsible organization. And that certainly is going to be a positive for us as we start to position ourselves in front of fundraising efforts and putting forth our business plan of how we intend to grow the course in the future. So the financial controls are going into place. There is going to be a full board in place with committees so we can start to get things done. So we hope once we can get fundraising going that we can start to fulfill the payment of our bills. As of tonight, the payment towards the Evanston water includes payment for all of 2012 and some going back in history. This evening, not to be too ceremonial about it, but I brought another check, which is somewhere. I thought it was better than chocolates. So that brings our balance up to half of the total owed, more than covers what we consumed in 2012, and it goes back and pays some of the history. Pardon
me, sir. We just have a quick question from Alderman Grover. Okay.
I was just going to thank Mr. Weinberg. You have no idea what this man has done to rein in the board, to shape it up, to put the golf course, I think, on a much different trajectory than it was a year ago. We have now some payments towards the water bill arrears, and I've been party to a couple interesting conversations with board members, and more recently with Commissioner Deb Shore from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District about a couple issues. And an interesting one is the idea of pumping water from the North Shore Channel to irrigate the golf course rather than buying water from the city of Evanston, finding a way to ensure that the water is appropriate for irrigating recreational landscape and as a way of saving money. So working with the MWRD and with this new board of directors, I think the golf course is going to be in much better shape this year. So thank you, Mr. Weinberg.
Thank you.
Over and over again.
For
all you've done.
We're trying to be as open and as transparent as we possibly can. Our financial controls are going to be transparent and very tight. And we did have a difficult time this past year going after fundraising. That's not going to be the case this year. Lastly, we're working with the city and we're working with the YMCA on a program to bring golfing to Evanston youth. We think that that's going to be a great activity on behalf of the golf course and certainly benefiting the youth. I had, through much of my life, a weekly game that I went out with my dad, and I'd like every kid in Evanston, boy or girl, to have that same opportunity. It's a wonderful thing to go out on a golf course and have a game with your folks. There are capital improvements that we're looking at. We are kind of falling apart right now, but that's part of our fundraising effort, and we're going to be addressing that. If you got any questions, that's why I'm here.
We have one question, Alderman Fisk.
One of the nice things about having a Christmas break is that you get to think about things a little bit more leisurely than you would otherwise. And I spoke with the city manager today and asked him whether there was any precedent for creating an intergovernmental park district that would cover both Evanston and Wilmette and basically help fund the golf course. He said that he was aware of that in other communities, didn't know very much about how that would be done here, but I've asked him for more information about that, and that might be something. I think we should talk about that as a committee once we get more information. I think for lots of reasons it makes lots of sense.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about the golf course is that I happen to live within the Lighthouse Park District area, and so I'm taxed for that. People are taxed for Ridgeville. We're taxed for lots of different things. But usually those park districts are neighborhood-oriented. The golf course serves all of us. And I did play at that golf course when I was a kid, so I was one of those out there with parents. And it's just a wonderful resource. And I'd like to find a way to put it on a firm footing now and in the future, and that that certainly will be something worth looking at. I don't know, how that will, end up, but we should get that information and share it with you and the committee as well. So I hope that can be on an agenda in the future. Mr. City Manager, I don't know how long that will take to do that, but.
I think that'd be great.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Alderman Fisk, good evening. That's certainly something we can come back with. As you know, I'm very pleased that we've been talking about the golf course and dealing with issues with water for some time. Unfortunately, I have to rain on your parade just a little bit. The golf course remains in arrears, and so we don't have policy really to allow that to continue. If the council is pleased, if the committee is pleased with the report you've received this evening, I would ask that the committee recommend to the council that I be authorized to enter into an agreement between the city and the Evanston-Wilmette Golf Association that would lay out additional terms for repayment, and as long as those terms are being followed, that then there would just no longer be an issue to come before you. We would go back to the point we were, and I don't even know, Mr. Gaynor, how long it has been since we have been square with water payments. It's been several years.
Actually, just 2011 and 12. They were always.
Well, so 2010 was, I think, the last.
They've always paid. It's just been somewhat after the fact.
So with a period of no payment of the last, 18 months, approximately, 12, 18 months. So, Mr. Chair, if that would be sufficient, then I would ask that the committee forward this item back to the full council with the recommendation that the city manager be authorized to enter into agreement for the other dollars in arrears. And we'll come back to the committee probably later in the spring with a discussion regarding a multi-jurisdiction special district.
Before we entertain that motion, I think we have a question from Alderman Holmes.
Well, I had a question and a comment. First off, I really did appreciate the 3-year budget in capital improvement, because when you say you're falling apart, I was trying to figure out how you're going to get it together. So I really appreciate seeing that. But I had a question about the golf carts. Do you own the ones that are there now, or are you renting them?
They're leased.
They're leased.
And they're very old.
Okay, but so in 2015, then you're going to purchase them, or is that lease fee?
We're hoping to lease some, with a similar agreement, get some newer carts, so they won't require as much maintenance. There's a conversation going on with the lease agent right now.
Okay, because that wasn't clear to me. Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Alderman Fisk.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion then that we do exactly what the city manager said and authorize him to work out an agreement with the Evanston Golf Association. And do you have to bring that to council then? I would appreciate it. Okay, and for future funding and repayment of water bills and any other bills that are due to the city.
Looking for a second, authorize the motion. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for your report, sir.
Yeah, great job.
We have one more citizen comment before we adjourn. Ms. Esther. Name and address.
My name is Betty Esther. Did you want to speak? No. Okay. It's Betty Esther. I stay at 2013 Church Street. First, I'm happy for the golf course that is going to stay, that we are going to keep some more green space in Evanston and not put concrete over it, like you plan on doing in front of my house. But we'll fight that at another date.
Thank you.
The one thing I do hope, and I will be talking with the Evanston and Wilmette Golf Association, and to see if they would be willing to, I know I'm going to put you on the spot, but to have a program. I don't golf, but it's good exercise, I hear. But to talk about a summer program. So if you could give me your number, I'll call you.
Okay.
Anywhere.
Is that the end of your comments, Ms. Esther?
No. 3 things. Remember, that's just one. In the minutes in the package, one thing I saw was about the township, where you was talking about space and the possibility with the lease going up in September of 2013 and the relocation and everything. I would hope that it should stay where it's at or someplace, thank you, from the Civic Center. The Civic Center is a nice place, but for the people that need it, it has a bad connotation to it. I'm sorry that it has, but the reputation is something that people really do not desire coming to or feel that they get a favorite feeling or anything from the city when they come down here. But they would not be with the city, but the office that they would come to would be with the city. We need to keep it separated. It is a different government entity and should be in its own building. That's the other thing. I read the police reports and things and stuff, and I worked with a group. I worked with the group that came up with the second Citizen Police Advisory Committee. I'm not sure which one it is. We was kind of disappointed in that because we had hoped that they would be getting the full report and everything before getting a summary. I have talked to some of the people that is on both committees. Some of them are happy with it, some of them are not. This, as you know, as we stated, if you look back at the 2008 all the council decision when they put that committee, they allowed it to be in place. We had said then that we was coming back to have an independent police review board. After the things that have went on, the killings and the shootings and stuff, and looking at the complaint, I am more heartfelt and steadfast in making that happen with the people that I'm working with. It's been, because we have, you look, and as you talk about the number of complaints and how they are and everything, and you wonder, all of these complaints, how can they all be non-founded? In some of the conversation I've had with the police department, I can understand why people don't come and why they are unfounded, because people do not come to say speak up, and that needs to change. The Citizen Network of Protection has been involved in educating the community on how to deal with police. What is your rights under the Constitution? How to talk to policemen respectfully, how to stay calm in a situation where you want to scream at the top of your lung, which is difficult, and also where we kind of demand that the policemen and ask the policemen when they come to our meeting to have the same respect for the young people, for all of the citizens, no matter where they are. We have had the Office of Professional Standards at our meeting to tell us what is the process, to go over that process of what went through, how does a complaint happen, what is the next step and the next step. Unfortunately, the officer did not get through her whole presentation because we got stuck with people say, when I talk to the officerman, and then you come back and they feel they are harassed, what do you do with this? How come I don't file this? Why come I don't get answers and stuff? So we got stuck there. So we are having her to come back to pick up with her number 5 slide and complete the whole process. Unfortunately, it'll be a different person. We didn't get it in. I know I'm going on. But to wrap it up, we are there. We tell the people, if you have a complaint and you want to file it, there are people with the Citizen Network of Protection that meets the 3rd Tuesday of every month at Fleetwood Jordan that will help you to write your complaint, to ask you questions, to make sure you are getting everything you need to have in your complaint, to talk about it, and to make sure that you understand. And we do tell them that, well, this really don't sound like or what it is, and we look at the different laws. We go on the website for them to read and to check it out. I know we are kind of passed over, glazed at, and nobody listened or mentioned that we even much said anything. I have said this before here. And you talk about institutional racism. Well, this here is where it began. Because when the Greenwald spoke, and I got up and spoke about the Citizen Network of Protection, come out, talk what we have this meeting, we are working with the police to get a better understanding, a better relationship. That wasn't mentioned. But then the lady got up and said something, and her stuff was mentioned. And you have different things that are mentioned. And I had a conversation with 2 other people that was at my table at the last meeting because I felt it wasn't going to do any good. They haven't did any good. You're going to have the last one on the 24th. 3 meetings to change 400 and some odd years of racism, 400 years of slavery, wiping it out in 4 meetings. That's not going to happen in 4 meetings. It is a long, hard fight. Nobody is willing. And like I told the 2 young ladies that was kind enough to came and was sensitive to say they are willing to, we want to do this and try to move it forward. All we are asking, we can't ask you to move out of the country and leave it to us. Someone would, but I'm not.
Ms. Esther, I'm so sorry. I'm going to just, okay, go ahead.
All I'm asking is that our community deserve, demand, and require the same respect. When I say something, it has value. It has meaning. It should be taken seriously. When I have sat here in this council and heard my word repeated by a white person, and then when they said it is given value, then you're telling me I'm less of a person. Then if you're going to say you want to deal with institutional racism, when better get up and speak, then my word is value. You repeat them and you hold them and trust them and move on them. Not wait till a white person says them and then move on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Esther. Alderman Holmes, you want to say something?
Yes, I'd like to make a reference probably to I think the Rules Committee would be the appropriate one, okay. That when the Rules and the Human Services Committee meetings are scheduled and rules get canceled, that the time for the Rules Human Services Committee be moved up to the 6 p.m. time rather than waiting till 7:30.
Sure.
Can I get a second on that?
I think we'd all.
So we'll move that and make that reference. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we adjourn, just really quick, I wanted to acknowledge that this is Mrs. Lyons' last meeting with our committee, and we just want to thank you so much for your service and attention. And our next meeting will be Monday, February 4th at 7:30. And we will have Joe McCray will be our staff person for the next 3 months. So we'll welcome Mr. McCray next month. Again, to everyone that showed up, we want to thank you. Clearly, we have some things to deal with this year. And so prayerfully, we will pray for peace in our wonderful town of Evanston, more prosperity, and I look forward to chairing the next 3 months.
Right.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Director Lyons.
Yes. Thanks, Karen.
T.com. And you are tuned to 98.7 WFMT Chicago and WFMT.com.